Well, I want to start by saying thank you to CTM for generating this safe space for open discussion, which is much needed in these times. And I want to introduce our panelists, of course. We have Carla Boregas, Brazilian musician, founder of label Dama da Noite, member of post-punk trio Rakta, and recently coordinator and booker at Auta in Sao Paulo. We have Hugo Esquinca, Mexican sound researcher and founder of Berlin-based label Otzko Collective. Valentina Montalvo, better known as Valesuchi, Chilean DJ and producer based in Rio de Janeiro and member of Coro Fundo. And Laura Diaz, multidisciplinary artist, member of Teto Preto and co-founder of Mamba Negra and Mamba Negra Records, no? In Sao Paulo. I want to begin by saying that music is an incredibly powerful tool that can strengthen social bonds and build empathy and give voice and empower voices that are underrepresented. And throughout Latin American musical history, narratives have been tied to struggle and political resistance. It's been that way in the past, it's still that way now. There's this right-wing conservative power coming back in many Latin American countries. And well, we have here 5 perspectives. This is a very complex and broad topic, but I think throughout the talk you'll get a glimpse at least of what's going on in terms of music and politics in Latin America. So I wanted to start by asking all of you, I wanted to get into the more personal details, how it was growing up in your city. How did that inspire you creatively? And perhaps when was the first time you noticed that music was more than just for personal pleasure or entertainment, but that it actually could have the power to move the masses and create positive change? I don't know who wants to start, but... Dun, dun, dun. Laura?
I just got on the plane.
That's
no.
true. She just came.
I just came here.
Well, I can talk a bit about Mexico City and growing up there, downtown Mexico City, and rather than being aware what music at large or what was the repercussion of music in the social landscape, well, for me it was always really about how loud the city was and how inherently excessive the full sonorities there, or the spectrum there is, and you're exposed to this all the time. So I have been living in Berlin for 7.5 years now, but I see that this exposure to excess, and excess at the levels of what you listen to there, and also what you see. It's not a peaceful city.
Yeah.
In
Latin
many ways.
American countries are very chaotic and noisy. That's the beauty of them as well. But silence, there's not many places where you can experience silence. No?
Yeah, so I think that had an enormous effect on what I do today, even if it's not explicitly said, it's implicit in the work. And yeah, I don't know if it also it is aligned with something positive or negative. It's also like there's always this threshold there of like in a city like that one, the lines are really not so determined somehow of like what is good or what is like or positive of growing up there in terms of exposure and in terms of what you listen to and in terms of what you see and everything. So that's what I can.
And what's maybe the first time you felt that you belong to, thanks to music, you belong to a community, or that there was, you could create a change through it?
Well, it was rather than, well, it's really associated with some kind of, it's a commercial dynamic, but there's these chantings in Mexico about tamales or
Yeah.
they're selling old metal or they're buying old metal, but this is scattered all over the city, so you identify with the fact that you can eat and buy something from these people in this or in this area through these chants, and now it's just it's recorded media now, so you listen to these recordings all over the city, and I think that was the first thing I can remember.
Of it being more like a collective
Yeah,
experience.
of course.
Yeah.
I accessed a music world and a music scene at a pretty young age in Santiago because of my older brother, my only brother. And I quickly noticed that I could access Santiago, especially because it's the main city in Chile. It's like super influenced by US capitalism and neoliberalism. So musical influences are really like massive, and mainstream was always a thing after dictatorship. Like really, I don't know, there's this joke about Pinochet liking Cat Stevens. So Cat Stevens was like a big thing in Chile, and like really specific US or European artists, but like not a really wide
And
range of...
the radio contributes to that as well.
Of course. And I started going out like early 2000s because of my brother, and I accessed a scene. And Chile is like a really repressive society, like going out. You can't drink in the street. Going out is like really, like curfew time is really tight and stuff. And there are no clubs still today. Like there aren't many clubs. So it was really interesting to see how punk bands, experimental electronics, and maybe a DJ, I guess it was like that everywhere, I don't know, but who was in something different, in a different look for music. They were all together in a really small way. The scene was like really small. And now, I guess, with how things have changed and parties have become more popular, like electronic parties, I still think we don't really realize that, but what we do in Latin America is like a huge exception. Like I remember a couple of years ago, I saw this radio rates of like what was the most popular music in Chile. Number one was like rancheras and like romantic Latin singers.
Baladas. And
Second, it was like metal bands.
Okay.
Third, it was, I don't remember, but like other kind of independent or like smaller crews of people listening to electronic music, or it was like no one. So we lose like the proportion of that. That has changed a lot. But when I started going out, it was just like this micro world that you accessed. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
I think when I first got like really connected to music and I felt part of a community was when I was 15 years old, that I moved to a new school. I came from a very ghetto neighborhood where people were listening mostly to rap or samba, pagode. But then when I met these people and started to go to punk concerts, I felt like, oh, they think the way I feel like. about all the injustice and all these feelings like I don't agree with this thing or that, and then I found myself very represented through these groups and like all this culture of DIY. So this was the first time I felt like in a community, like because for me it wasn't fair the way we were living in the city. Like São Paulo is very, very chaotic, like the injustice. You walk on the street and you see someone dying in one side, and the other one there's like a $1 million car. So for me that was always like, what the fuck, where are we living, you know? And this kind of music represented a lot for me, this situation, this reality. Yeah.
And was the scene a big scene or a smaller scene? Or
Yes, it was a big
It was a
scene,
big scene.
actually. Yeah. Well, different like styles or people, but like a big scene. Punk was always a big thing in Brazil. Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I think that through my childhood and beginning of being teenager, there was this thing about the Brazilian chanson, the Brazilian popular music. That is a big thing that we have. It's a great tradition that we have in Brazil. But at the same time, I was always really connected with the lyrics and the context and trying to find out why I was so emotional about Caetano Veloso's chansons about 68 or the dictatorship. So I always felt somehow inspired when I was really little, and I was like singing songs about dictatorship. I didn't even know what I was saying, but it was like just walking against the wind, because Caetano says, caminhando contra o vento. And I was doing the same thing he was saying, not knowing that this was about dictatorship, but I felt like warm inside. So maybe this was the first time that I didn't realize, but I did felt that music was something really important. And I think I never separated like music from politics or arts from politics. I think it's kind of impossible for us, at least in Latin America, to split this, or at least it would be so hypocrite. So, because it's impossible to, oh no, never mind about his opinions. He's a metalhead, but he's a fascist, but he sounds great. I already heard this here in Berlin.
Oh, yeah.
And, what do you mean, like, never mind? So it's impossible for me to never mind that someone is fascist. And I think that with this thing about the chanson, the popular music in Brazil, there's something also about the women in music in Brazil. I get this feeling that usually we are only accepted first thing as singers. They never, we don't know much of the instrumentists, women instrumentists, and etc. in Brazilian music. All the authors are like men, like Tom Jobim, like João Gilberto, like Caetano Veloso. And we have the singers, the great singers, Elis Regina, Gal Costa, Maria Bethânia, blah, blah. Okay, so when I was arrested, occupying a building against the cops on the university, we were on a big discussion with votations like assembleia. I don't know how to translate it. Assembleia? Assembly. We were at an assembly, and I consider myself more radical than the center left, you know, that is that is happening right now. So we heard a lot of talk about, olá, o meu nome é fulano de tal, eu sou do movimento, e nós devemos, não sei o que, blá, blá, e nós estamos juntos aqui para defender uma causa. And this was really annoying, because no one would be listening to anything the guy was saying or the girl was saying. So when I was arrested, I thought about changing the way that I was using my microphone. Because when I was in this assembly, I wrote myself to speak. And when I got the microphone, I just began singing a music that was about dictatorship and stuff like this, because it was an assembly because we were arrested. So after we got out, of course. But it was really powerful because people, I didn't have to say anything like in a bureaucratic way, but people felt it and people just comprehended. And it was kind of funny because when I was arrested, my friend just told me, "You better start singing because you're gonna be in trouble right now." So maybe it was a good thing that I was arrested, because otherwise I wouldn't be here singing with Teto Preto and as Angela Carnioso. It was my way to find this double identity to mischieve the repression. So they could never arrest me because, oh, she's just an artist. They were, yeah, I am just an artist. Be calm. But that way I could say gasolina neles without being criminalized. And that's about it. That's the contradiction. Of course, I have many privileges for being a white girl, a cis girl from Latin America, and that's really different from the perspective that we have from people that are living on peripheral zones in São Paulo, because São Paulo is huge. So this is my opinion, like growing up downtown, and I'm finishing. But in this Brazilian music, I feel also that with this thing about the singers and being a muse, an untouchable muse, I think that when we started to create this underground scene again in São Paulo, with the independent parties, with the street parties, with the parties in occupations and venues like that, it meant a lot to us because it was about creating safe places for us to live. When I was a teenager, I also find myself really represented in the punk scene at like 15 years old.
I think you met each other?
I met
or
Paula. She remembered my first nickname on punk, on punk gang. Yeah. She's like, "You were Porca." Oh my God. It was almost like this. But I felt this when I was searching for something that I found in punk energy. But at the same time, even the punk scenario was really misogynist. And was really homophobic without saying anything. So yes, we're anti-racism, but you're still a machist, you know, and you're still a misogyn and homophobic. Hey, that fag, like you don't say this. So electronic showed up to me first when I was a child as EDM, because that's what we hear, like, that's what comes to Brazil, like. Happy, can't you see I'm happy now? And I was like, oh my God, that's what adults hear. I don't want to be an adult, I don't want to grow up. Like, I don't want to grow up for real, not only harmonious. But when I grew up, I found this gorgeous fags, trans, and independent women and lesbians that was in the same situation as I was. Because no one would respect me in the music scene, because, oh, you're a drug addict, you're scream too loud, or something like this. And in the electronic, I felt safe to begin to work this safe space for us to exist, to simply exist. Yeah. And at the same time, I never got the chance to go to music academy. They never accepted me. I tried a lot. But like Kubrick, they never accepted him. So they never accepted me. So electronic was something that I could do. I could learn for myself and with my friends. It was something that I could just do it right away and get my feelings out of my head. So queer community was really important for me because we created this space that is much more bigger than São Paulo by now. And it's much more bigger than the club scene, you know?
Thank you. Hugo, we were talking about that you migrated to Berlin 7 years ago and that you haven't been back to Mexico in 4 years, no? And how has migration affected your work, and how do you maintain a connection with Mexico socially, politically, and despite the distance?
Well, it would be family and friends, but migration has affected me deeply in the sense that I have been invited to go to Mexico, but in order to justify, let's say, my permanence here, or navigate a bit how I can stay here, well, that has vitiated the fact of going back for these 4 years. I mean, I had 2 invitations to do something, but at the same time, I have a visa appointment, Schengen, blah, and this has pretty much determined if I can go back or not. Even if it's for I mean, I also don't want to go back for 3-4 days, no? It doesn't really make sense. Or exclusively for a project. I think that's incredibly narcissistic and myopic. No, it's not about art, it's also about, or whatever kind of project it might be. But yeah, I mean, I have become very much aware, and I think this is a great space that CTM can provide so that we can open up a conversation about what it is also to be Latin American somewhere, perhaps. And one also needs to sometimes acknowledge the fact that we are not really wanted here. Like, we are wanted in Berlin and CTM, yeah, but you exit Berlin and you realize that.
Yeah.
Hey, where are you living? It's always like this.
Your German is strange or whatever,
Yeah.
but it's clear that, yeah, there is, and just yesterday, you know, they had Brexit finally, or whatever that might mean. But you see that it's really regressive, and you become aware of the amount of regressiveness that, or conservatism that is really rooted in Europe. And being, you know, coming from Latin America, you're indoctrinated with this idea that there's progress there, it's enlightened. But at the end, there's certain areas. And you exit, and it's not so.
That's true, yeah, of course. And Valesuchi, you moved to Rio like a little bit more than 2 years ago. How was that for you? Like, what were the differences and the similitudes you found? And did you feel welcomed when you got to Rio? What was that like?
Like, I don't know how many of you have been to Brazil, but I mean, I know when you always the grass is greener on the other side in the neighbor's backyard. But considering how repressive and shy and cold and the relationship to your body is in Chile, and starting to play in Brazil and realizing how I was treated as a woman, as an artist, as a friend even. I was never like more myself. I was just like blown away of how free I felt, considering, of course, we're Latin Americans and machismo is like a huge part of our lives. But I guess it also has to do that I'm not really Chilean. I kind of realized that with time because my mom is from a Palestinian Lebanese family. So it was like this vibe, like big family, food, overprotection. And my dad is Ecuadorian.
Oh, okay.
And my dad is like the most charming, nice, make one friend every day kind of vibe. And he always told me and my brother, like, you have to choose anywhere in the world where you want to live and like do whatever you want. He was like really, that can be like tricky also when your parents tell you that. I was really lucky, but in Brazil, and I traveled to Europe before. I've traveled, but really, something here. It's the body. It's how everything vibrates. It's how people look at each other. It's how people say hi. It can be cynical many times, and it's just tragicomic how things work in Latin America. And Brazil is a quite example of that these days, but Chile too, but it's more tragic than comic now. But Brazilian culture has more releases in life. You can access other levels of fun or just freedom. Chile is it's gray. It's gray. People's afraid. People's fucking afraid the whole time of the other, of being, of their own bodies. I have this theory, like seriously, I think youngsters in Chile don't have sex. Like seriously. Like they don't know how, like people don't flirt, like it's crazy. It's not that the cartoonish image of Brazilian. No, it's not about that. It's like another relationship to your body. It's different.
But that's the conservative side of Latin America.
And
The
dictatorship.
same thing happens in Lima as well. Like
Yeah.
the idea of the
yeah.
body and you know, and sex and freedom.
Yeah.
We're very contained.
Yeah.
So I understand how
Yeah.
it is. When I've gone to Brazil, that I haven't felt that. Even though I'm sure there are a lot of issues, no, but I felt more freedom in that sense, which was pretty great.
So I highly recommend come visit. Seriously, I mean, it's
Please
funny,
come
but
to
like
Brazil.
seriously, please come to Brazil.
Carla, we were talking the other day about privilege and about how sometimes you don't want to carry this political flag with you when you're doing art, when you're doing music. But you also spoke about the freedom that you encountered within the underground scene. Can you tell us more about that sentiment? Because we talked about the indigenous peoples as well, having in Brazil going through the terrible situation,
Murder.
you know, and murder.
Murder.
And
Yeah.
so.
And when I first read about this panel, I was like thinking radical voices of Latin America, and I was like looking at myself. I was like, now we are living this very tough moment in Brazil. Like I think most of you have heard something about it. Like our president, this amazing guy Bolsonaro. And I thought, like, our voice, we have voice, but like the real resistance in Brazil now, it's like all these people like living that had been murdered, no, like the indigenous people. I was thinking a lot about that, like if I could change and like, I think other people could speak better now than me. I can like share my experience as a white woman. The same Laura said before, no? I think there are a lot of more important voices in Brazil now than mine. Like, it's a really tough time. It's like every day we are listening a lot of different news, and it's like hell, actually. I know it's a vibrating place and all this you told, but it's like getting sad to live there. You know, like you just see a lot of tragedies happening, and you're like, what the fuck? What can I do? So I think this is what we are trying to do with Rakta and build all these different realities, sharing time with people, giving people like an island, like a mental island, while we are playing and make this place like a new place and thinking about new communities and a new world. And music's more related for me with that than like carrying a political flag. It's about creating words. It can be political as well, but and this is what I found in the underground scene there. Like, we can create our reality. We can share with people, you know, what we really believe, like not all this shit that people are saying in Brazil, or even make people feel more warm. And I don't know, it's just a rough time. So I think through music we are trying to do that, even if what we play is very noisy or aggressive. It's just we are trying to hug people through the sound. To heal. We are I don't know, I think music's power, the sounds are powerful for healing as well. So, yeah.
And Laura, could you tell us about Mamba Negra and Mamba Records? I was watching the video for Pedra Petra, and I loved how in the end you gave the names not only to the band members, but also to the people involved in your creative process and who participate with you in your creative environment. Why is it important to give visibility to people in your environment, in your that participate in your creative process?
Well, as Carla said, it's been really tough to be in Brazil doing what we do. Of course, we've had a lot of privileges, as we said before, but it's still really hard. But when I got a huge lesson from house music, when I was listening to Eddie's Drew DJ set that she made on Mamba Negra last year, and those 3 hours, I got everything that I didn't know about house, that I was feeling like, shit, that's about it. When you're like being really repressed, the worst thing you can do to the right side is just, you know what? I'm gonna be happy. I'm gonna try to be happy, and I'm gonna fight to be happy. You know, I'm gonna fight for it because I've got the right to do it. I'm alive today, so the war is gonna be today. You know, so I think that's the kind of energy I try to get from repression and from violence. And that's why I think that me and Cashew started Mamba Negra on 2013, because as I said, the Brazilian music scenario is still really misogynist and still really machist. And somehow in the electronic, in the underground, we found the space, space is the place. We found space to, I love it.
We created the space, actually, no?
Yes, we created this space that is the place. But that was our chance to create these new areas, because electronic music was built inside the nightclubs a lot while I was teenager, and even through 2010 or 2007 or something like this. And the nightclubs in São Paulo are really repressive. Usually they are spots where the queer community can develop itself and have a safe place, but not in São Paulo, actually. So we felt the necessity, basically the necessity, of creating these spaces to be like women, to be gay, to be queer, to be travesti, to be non-binaries, and to be taken seriously, you know, to create something that we believed. And these nightclubs don't represent us. You know, we never felt like home there. We never felt represented by Berghain, for example. I don't give a shit about Berghain, you know? Ooh. And thank you. And it was really important. It's a matter of life and death, really, as Carla said, aussi. And this place, aussi, sorry. But is a place to build relationships, is a place to get paid, is a place to get the money circulating among us. Us, I mean women, LGBTQ community. Because this nightclubbing scenario is also owned by businessmen, white, straight guys, rich guys, you know. It's the same thing around here, I guess. But no one can say this out loud. But Mamba Negra is like is a platform for the artists, for the independent artists to develop themselves, to get the chance to show their work, and that's it. Mamba, you asked also about Mamba Hack.
Yep.
It was a big dream of me and Cashew since the beginning, but we kind of were. We were learning how to do it while we were doing it, you know, because when we started, no one was doing like this kind of structure of the independent parties, because we wanted a good sound system as well, you know. Function 1 is not actually good for our kind of sound, so sorry. So, but we wanted a good sound system. We wanted to deliver a nice experience to the public. And the idle buildings, the deactivated factories were just perfect for this kind of public and this kind of experience. So, with the real estate speculation and gentrification of São Paulo, we got that chance to occupy these places. So, when we were on the second year of Mamba, okay, so now we're gonna do the label, yes, because we wanted to do the 3 parts of the production chain. Like, we wanted to pre-produce, we wanted to make the party, and we wanted to circulate with the production, because that's super important. And we started, like, we're not like a record label, actually, because we offer really not that much to the artists. Like, incredible Valentina just released Tragicomic album, which is great, it's lovely. And we try to I don't know, to fortalecer, strengthen. We try to strengthen the independent artists, women, and people who are beginning, or that aren't beginning, but people who are in the same scene, the same underground scene. So we can exist, you know?
Yeah.
It was necessity, I guess.
Of course. Yeah. And we have a lot of progressive political views within the music scenes, but that doesn't make it perfect, obviously. And what do you feel are the problems and issues and challenges within these communities? Because, for example, in Lima, a lot of male band members and musicians are being called out now for their violence towards women, and these are the same men who are going to protests and who are, you know, copying and pasting feminist discourse on their social media. What do you think are the challenges or the issues you see within your own communities that apparently are supposed to, you know, have
we
these
rule. They don't exist. No, they exist. In Brazil, we call them esquerdo machos. But I think that the most dangerous thing about Brazil, at least, is that I see that the transition that we had from dictatorship to democracy was basically an agreement between the left side and the right side. And the right side said, you will be now you're going to be legal. You're going to be on legality, the left wing. But they will be unarmed, while the right wing continued to be armed, really strongly armed. So I feel like the right side, if I can put this way to simplify things, but the right side, the fascists, are really well organized. And they've got like technology, and they have like production head, you know? They're always like on schedules and on Google Sheets. And I think we should do it also, because actually I think that maybe we can be a majority and not minorities, how people say.
Yeah.
But we're so disorganized and dearticulated, because dictatorship was really strong also in all Latin America. And by the way, I think that it wasn't like something that just happened. I think that Europe and USA made sure that every country in Latin America could have its own dictatorship, bloody dictatorship, because as you know by the wars, you know that this can leave marks by generations ahead. So we were the future. I think that really Latin America was El Dorado back in the 60s. But they just shut that door off when they put it and implanted in Latin America all the dictatorships in all the countries of Latin America. So that's not a coincidence. that is something really powerful. That means that we are like really, really strong, and we got a vision about the future. Because I don't know if you unfortunately can see the future, but we still do see a future, and we are fighting for it. So I think that maybe that's it. I think we should organize better. We should pay really attention and get like discipline, you know, some kind of discipline that they have on the way that we don't like. But we gotta build this future that we believe that that we can reach. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we can reach, but at least we will try, you know, because we're alive. So.
Yeah. And Carla, you were telling me about what happened to the Secretary of Culture in Brazil. Can you tell us more about
Wagner.
Now ex-Secretary of Culture, he did a speech. It was for the television. He did like a plagio of a Goebbels speech, like a Nazi speech.
With Wagner playing.
Yes, and all the like the aesthetics, the same, like same words, really. So this is how we are now.
that? Yeah. And he was removed, right?
Yes, he
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
removed,
yeah.
but like the
But
president
Doesn't
said.
mean anything. Now it's Regina Duarte,
Yeah,
who
okay.
is an actress that is terrible.
But the
She always
pres-
says, "I am afraid of communism." there's a video of her saying, "You know what? I am afraid. I'm afraid of communism." So that's it.
And the president said that he asked, like the ex-secretary, he did apologize it himself, like said, "Oh, I'm sorry for that." But it's just like,
That's crazy.
yeah.
And of course, this makes us not trust our leaders or trust in the people working within the government. But have any of you experienced a positive program or initiative that's been that's happened within the government in any of your cities? There's no in terms of culture, nothing.
This year, totally the opposite.
Yeah.
Just
But in
like-
any
no,
time,
but I think
Acho
that
que virada cultural.
But no.
virada
They just they just misleading money, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
But
I
I
don't
think
know,
that
just-
the only good thing about this is that it's becoming even more clear in which side you are,
That's
you know. So this for me is something good at the same time, because for a long time we were all sitting in the same table with people we don't necessarily know, but now we know their opinions, and now we know each one's opinions. So this is really important in war. You gotta
Yeah.
know who is your
Who's your
enemy,
enemy?
and we know who is our enemy, and they kind of don't understand what we are. So we gotta think this way, otherwise you're gonna be like killed. We're gonna kill ourselves on the hotels when we get back, because I think the only good thing is about it, we're really valorizing the places and the spaces that we have to get in touch with each other and to exchange our productions and to bring artists here or to send artists here. I was saying Brazil because I'm always in Brazil, sorry. But bringing artists to Brazil or coming here, and I think that's about the most important thing about our privilege when we go on stage. Because when I go on stage, I'm never alone. I got this huge responsibility that I feel, and all my girls are inside me, really, truly inside me. People ask me, "Oh, where do you get this energy?" I always say, I'm not alone. You didn't understand it. I'm not pretending when I cry on stage. I never pretend. I'm flesh and bones. But everyone is with us when we are here, because everyone who is in Brazil right now is like really happy that we could make it here, that they feel represented by us, even if they aren't white as we are, because we are together. So when we go on stage, we're with a bunch of people, you know, and you can feel it.
Yeah, the resistance is getting stronger, I think, because all of that, we are like trying to get
Get together.
Yeah.
I just think in response to what you were saying, that you are able to determine who's your enemy. I think the situation right now, talking to friends that are running things in Mexico City in different degrees, or like people from either NAFI or doing Terminal or other places that were open and got shut down, is that in Mexico it's getting incredibly complex to know who's your enemy, because there's a leftist government that is not really supporting culture at the moment, and the explosion of narco in Mexico is another force. So it's not anymore the left against the right. If you are not affiliated to the proper cartel, perhaps you cannot run a night if you don't have enough money to cover the monthly rate of what you need to cover. And this for me represents something that I mean, I'm not living there, and I haven't been there, unfortunately, in a long time, but I don't have such a positive perspective on how the situation is evolving there. 2019 was the most violent year in the history of Mexico. So, and I have the fortune, let's say my mother works for female human rights, so I'm informed on like the amount of feminicide, like all these things and this is really propelled by another structure, which is narcotráfico. And it's inevitable to think that, yeah, there is the intention of having resistance, of having progressive music, having progressive, whatever that might mean. But there is another force that it's not, it cannot be, it's not you cannot really define anymore if it's a political issue, an economic one. I mean, it's just a major market which feeds on, I mean, yeah, and I have been part of it or whatever, but you can buy drugs from Mexico in Berlin. So where does this money come from? Where does who sustains a party culture across the world, and heroin, whatever? Like, it's really complex. So my perspective, again, a little bit from a safer point, from afar, is just to say, oof, it doesn't look so super good, or like hyper positive, and like that these places get cancelled because they don't cover the economic necessities of a market that is way beyond them, no?
Yeah. It happened to me in Guadalajara.
Yeah.
Like, you have to stop, like, this club is not like bonded with the narcos, like, we have to stop the party now. 2 a.m. It was crazy.
And it's not to make bad publicity to Mexico. I think there's enough bad publicity, but it's just to be
Mexico
aware.
is also really cool. Go.
But at the same time in Brazil, we've got the narco traffic in power right now. Because the lawyer from the biggest gang of narcotráfico, that is called PCC, First Central Command, he's the minister, he's the main judge of the Supremo Tribunal Federal.
Like the main court.
STJ of the Supreme Court. I don't know how to
disgusting.
say. But his lawyer is on the Supreme Court, and he's the judge. And Bolsonaro is obviously related to the militias. Militia is the same thing. They can understand. Militia.
Yeah, like
I
former
translate.
militaries, like older.
Yes, and
retired
this is a
military.
tradition since dictatorship, because when they wanted to do terrorism, they would do with people that weren't on the institution, like they weren't like policemen, they were retired.
Yeah.
So they could do terrorism without being like blamed for it, institutionalized and blamed for it.
Yeah, they killed Marielle Franco. They live in the same homes complex with Bolsonaro in Rio. It's like insane.
Yeah, they send someone to kill Marielle, for example. So it's contradictional about, it's really contradictional to think about the narcotráfico, because we never know in which side they are, because they can go to a side, they can go to another, but the feeling that I get is Brazil right now, and this is a privileged information, all that we see now in Brazil has a lot to do with PCC and the other narcotráfico gangs being erased by them, because they are growing. And usually they were only in São Paulo, but what we see now in Rio de Janeiro that is becoming even more violent, or in the north of Brazil, is PCC getting to those places. And PCC, the first central command, that is the name of this label from narcotráfico, major label, they were created inside the jails. So actually, it was the state who created them, you know, and the church, of course. I don't know if you guys like churches, but
I was wondering if anyone has a question. We've been talking and talking, but maybe someone wants to ask something. No?
pode falar na cara.
Eric.
Cool. All right. Yeah, thank you all very much. It's been really, really interesting, all your points of view. I have a really simple question. Maybe you've already answered it in your discussion, but do you feel that it's really the responsibility of like a musician or an artist today to have a political stance and to incorporate it in their art? Like, is that like, yes, they must, or no, it's okay that they don't?
I was discussing the other day with an aunt about the political situation in Chile, and she was like, yeah, but, and there's this argument from the right wing in Chile that says, but why is everything so politicized? Like, it's not all about politics, like the discussion of what's happening. And then I just stopped, took a deep breath, and I Googled, what's the definition of politics? And I don't remember like the exact thing now, because I don't remember, but it has to do with how do you make decisions? How do you think things should be, and what are the how are your boundaries, and how things are decided for everyone? And if we are Latin American women, immigrant. The responsibility comes by realizing how much of an exception we are. And what Laura says, like, I'm not alone. Like, when I play music from my friends in Chile and in another part of the world, and I'm being able to make a living out of this, and I know my friends, like, are struggling to pay, like, I don't know, like a fifth of the cost of life that's here, and I'm here, it's just like, when you have a talent, when you have a privilege, when you have a great power like Spider-Man, you have a great responsibility. I mean, I have to honor life, I have to honor art, I have to honor music, I have to honor where I come from. It's like, this is not for granted. We don't have social grants of any kind. Like, of course it's political. It's a huge bet, not just for us. It's like, as Latin Americans, as what's happening in my friends are like, I'm not like overreacting. Like, I have close friends that have like lost their eyes like 2 months ago in Chile. Like, and I'm here, like this amazing festival. It's like bittersweet. You're never like alone, like Laura said. Like, that represents me completely. And yeah, I guess that answers. I guess.
Yeah, and
I don't know. I think especially in this age of extremely loud, self-indulgent politics, the best way to operate sometimes is also in a bit in invisibility. So try to associate with certain people, do certain things that you don't need to implicitly or explicitly say, yeah, my work is political, but rather that other actions that are parallel to what you are doing have political consequences inevitably. So perhaps in an age of loudness, it's also about to retract and be a bit invisible, try to infiltrate and navigate. But also the opposite, no? What you were saying, like, you feel that you have comrades, you feel that you encounter people, and you immediately with a gaze realize that there is a connection there and that you feel.
And what do we bring back also?
Yeah.
Like, I have to bring back something. Like, there's this game when you hide and seek. There's a last person that has like this magical power that un, dos, tres por mí, por todos mis compañeros. Like, you unblock everyone, like 1, 2, 3 for me and all my partners. Like, I feel that, like, okay, I'm doing well. Like, how do I spread this to where I come from, you know? Yeah.
This question almost, I'm not saying nothing personal, but I think this question sounds to me almost kind of cynical, you know, because when we say artists, this abstract collective, when you say artists, we know that the majority of these artists, so-called artists that we are referring to, are like white people. So, of course, this is political, you know? This is political since the beginning, because don't you think there are many colored people of color, that are artists, but wouldn't get the chance to be recognized as artists, or not even as human beings, you know? Like trans people, travestis, that's the word I like the most. So, it is political. It is even political. Bertolt Brecht, I don't know how to say it here, but Brecht says that to not have a side in politics is to take the side of the ruling party. Yeah. So I think that's about it, you know? When you, oh no, I'm just gonna be quiet. Yes, because you got the opportunity to be quiet. Because you got the opportunity to don't say anything. But if someone is stabbing you in your chest, you gotta speak something, right? No, I'm just gonna be blasé and quiet and really polite. That's not possible for us, unfortunately. And I always say that I feel like Europeans look at us as we were barbarians, but they forget that you are the barbarians, actually. You invaded Greece, and you destroyed Greece, so you were the barbarians. Here, especially here in Germany, you were barbarians. So you call yourself like the birth of civilization, of civility, as you're so civilized, but you were barbarians. You're not even able to accept the difference and coexist with different people. And that's the thing about us being murdered in Latin America since the beginning. We don't have the originary population from Brazil. Yeah. Even I am an intruder in my own continent, because it's an Indian continent, and everyone is dead. So I think that's it.
Carla, I don't know if you wanted to add something or...
Yeah, I think it's just impossible to well, you know, we spend like more than 1 hour talking about politics. It's something that it's our reality nowadays, so I don't even know what to say. It's just like something that we are talking every day. It's like, have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? You must be like, or deaf or blind to not think about it and not to talk and not to discuss.
Yeah, and we are never able to come and go through the countries. We always have some real clear lines that we have to pass through, and we have to prove that we were really professionals, that we're going to work, and when are you leaving? So that's not freedom, you know? That's not freedom. And when I know that when I were in a festival recently, and I found out that North American artists were being much well paid than us, I was really pissed off, because
welcome.
Now you're gonna say that's not political, you know? So, and that happens a lot. So most of the festivals just come like and call like 1 or 2 or 3 names from Latin America to say, hey, we're so avant-garde, we know Latin America. Or none of them at all, like Manto.
Yeah, but Valesuchi has a story about that too.
But that's the thing, that's the real thing. It's not funny at all, but I try to get some fun of it. But it's revolting, actually.
Yes, sometimes when people ask me, what do you think about living in Brazil? And I say, I think it's like a big island. Do you know, we are just there in the south, but it's a big island, a lot of people, and we can like handle ourselves. but nobody knows like what you call the North, like US or Europe. Who knows about what's going on in Brazil, like the culture? How many bands do you know from Brazil? How many artists do you know from Brazil? You know, it's like, culture is like very imperialist still, like.
And we get many, many, many artists that are happening right now, and they're not here with us. You know, so this is just beginning. You should be afraid. If I were you, I would do my homework.
I think we have 2 minutes or 1 minute left. I don't know if there's one more question. Yeah.
Hello, I am also Brazilian. I'm from Bahia, yes. And I'm here just for some days for some jobs I'm doing. I'm also an artist, a musician. I have many friends in Chile, and I have been to Mexico 2 times, so I think I'm quite aware of what's happening. I live in Bahia today. I live in Salvador all my life. I've lived there. And I've been thinking about after some trips I made to Latin America. I've been in Uruguay, in Argentina working, in Mexico working, and I thought 2 things about, and I would like to ask you what you think about it, about centers and peripheries. So, we Brazilians often don't consider ourselves Latin American. You know this. We Brazilians know this because I consider myself, I think you both consider also, but it's very normal not to have a common identity because of the difference of the language. Because we speak Portuguese and the rest of the continent speak Spanish, and Brazil is so big, it's almost like a continent also. For example, the difference between somebody from Bahia and somebody from Rio Grande do Sul is bigger than somebody from Uruguay and Argentina, for example, or from Chile and Peru, for example. So, and the same thing I hear you saying about being Latin American to Europe. We Bahamians think about São Paulo, for example, because there's all this issue of center and periphery even inside Brazil. Yes. So I'd like to know what you think about this, and how could we build more bridges, not only between our center in Brazil, that is Rio and São Paulo, who somehow culturally like colonized. We in Bahia have many issues with people. I know you are different, but you know what kind of people from São Paulo I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. So we have many issues with this, and I also have many issues because I'm a white guy from Bahia, but I've been raised in a poor neighborhood. So I've been all my life studied with black people because you know Bahia has 80% of black population. And I have studied in public school all my life. And I'm like a weird person because I can see things. I'm here sitting, and maybe you didn't think I was Brazilian because I don't look like a Brazilian. So I would know what you think about this. How could we construct bridges between these centers and peripheries, not always letting the energy flow from the peripheries to the center, and at the same time, construct some kind of respect between the different countries and between the different cultures without like trying to cut this colonization energy that happens also inside Brazil itself. I'll finish with an example. By the time of election, you know, in Northeast, Bolsonaro was not elected. Like, in Bahia, just one city elected Bolsonaro, just one city. So I felt very safe about it in my city, in Salvador, but at the same time I thought, what the fuck, these Paulistas fucked my life. What can I of course, I go to São Paulo frequently. Often I go to São Paulo. I have many friends there. I like people in São Paulo. They're very good buddies. But I know the population in general is like micro-fascist. Even the poor people, it's something very crazy. I would like to know what you think about this.
I agree with you, like, almost totally. When we go outside São Paulo to other parts of Brazil, and especially the north of Brazil, that is even higher than Bahia, we were so well treated by everyone. And that's why in Mamba we try to bring artists from Amazonas and also from Belém and from the north and from Bahia, because that's the thing about, I think, that decentralizing stuff. because when you get people who are different from that context, the context will change. The same thing the same process kind of happened on Mamba Negra and the other independent parties. Because in the beginning, in the really beginning, we were all white, for example. And okay, so how should we do this without being like colonialist? Well, if you want to change your public, you should put inside the production and inside the lineup the girls, the black ones, and the travestis and everyone. The so-called minorities, which I don't agree that we are minorities, because we are not. Use the term minority is to erase that we are majority. But this is one thing. The other thing is that this discussion that we are having with Bachiku, and that is also from Salvador, and other collectives like people of color, collectives from people of color. I don't know how to say. I say pretas in Brazil. Pretas e pretos. But people of color were really, really, really important in this whole scenario, not only in São Paulo, but in entire Brazil. Because they were all also saying to us that we were saying like, no, we got a decentralized culture. And they were saying, wait a minute, we want a place also downtown. Of course, we want independence in the peripheral zones, but we also want a place downtown, because downtown is where everyone goes and where you can come and go with transport and small venues or big venues. So we also learned a lot. I learned a lot as a white girl that, of course, we got a decentralized culture, but we also have to divide the room with our sisters and brothers, you know? Because it's kind of easy for us, like, no, we don't want downtown anymore. This is so bourgeoisie. No, it's not. It's about access and transportation and culture and all that stuff. Other thing that I think is more deep, scar, is like the course of San Francisco River. San Francisco somehow divides Brazil in two Brazils that aren't the same at all. And since I think that since our colonization, we've got different types of colonization on the north and on Sudeste, Southeast. Yes, the Paulistas. So we've got the Bandeirantes on the Southeast and this assassin and progressive colonizers on Southeast. And on Northeast, the gringos couldn't reach the sertão. They couldn't pass through the sertão. So I have no doubt that we live in Brazil that is not a united country. It's a really plural country. And yesterday, when Arte channel from France, apparently it was a big stuff. When they asked me, oh, aren't you nervous playing here in Paris? And I said, no, fuck. I'm super confident. I love when white people pay me to spank them. But I said, I was really nervous, like almost throwing up when we were about to play in Belém do Pará. Because I have no doubt when I go to Recife, when I go to Natal, when I go to Belém do Pará, these are cities that we usually don't get the money to go. Also, it's kind of, you know better Amazon than we do. I never been to Amazon. It's really hard for us to get to know Brazil, and that's also a strategy, you know, because this keep us apart. Even if we know that we shouldn't be apart, but we are apart in first place. So I got really nervous, really, really nervous when I was in Belém do Pará, because it was so clear that people has other relations with their own bodies, with music, with everything. I'm not talking about, oh, nature, like mysticizing people from North. No, I'm talking about electronic music. I'm talking about music. I'm talking about culture, real culture being born and being created. So always when I come to other cities, especially the north, that is a huge conquest, a huge victory for me, more than coming here, sorry. I waited like for my whole life to go to Belém do Pará. And when I got there, I was so inspired by the travestis, by women, by all the artists that were there, and I was really, really, really nervous to go on stage. I was almost throwing up before the show, because I think it's really important to show our appreciation to these people, because usually people just, with this Occidental head, they just go and say, oh, São Paulo is a big city, so you must be really professional and good in what you do. And that's not true. That's so not true, but I think it's a huge process, and what I try to do with the party, with Mamba Negra, is with the tools that I have in my hand, Cashew and other girls also, we try to recognize these artists and bring them and let them do ask them to do a remix for Teto Preto. We try to get to know each other, because dictatorship also did this, you know, Transamazonica and everything. We got a lot of scars through our history that was splitting like violently the southeast and the northeast. There are almost two different countries. I hate people from São Paulo also. We agree.
With Rakta, what we try to do is, well, the first time we went to the north of Brazil was last year, but in 2016 we went to Japan, so for us it was very funny. We had never been the north of Brazil, and we had been to Japan before, you know, so when we had the chance, like, if someone's paying our flights to play in the north, we try like to book a lot of concerts, like very small concerts, just to go to cities that we had never been before, so we can spend some time with, get to know the local scene, and this is very important. Like, but we haven't been to Bahia, never.
Yeah, we need
in 8
we need
years.
Please, please.
Would love to go, but it's sad though.
Yeah, we went to Australia before going to Belém do Pará in the same festival. So
That says a lot.
Our huge island.
great question.
Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to end this conversation. I think we have many hours to go. But I want to thank all of you for participating. It was amazing to get to discuss these issues.
Gracias, CTM.
Gracias, CTM.
Gracias, CTM.
Obrigada.
And Teto Preto is playing tonight.
Yes,
no?
and
So-
we've got a lot of merchandising for you guys.
So check out the program to see
Yes,
exactly
so if
the
you feel
times.
guilty, maybe you should buy one album. What do you think about
Yes,
it?
and just something I would like to say that
Yes.
this is very important, I think, for us like to speak about our realities and politics, but it's also important to speak about our art production or about our music. Sometimes what I feel is that we always need to talk about politics and or how is it to be especially being a woman.
Yes,
no?
yes.
How
What
is
is
it
like to be a
Yeah.
woman in music
music?
industry?
So sometimes to make our culture stronger, it would be very important to talk about it also.
Yeah.
Not only about how it feels to
Yeah.
To be a minority.
yes, our culture and
Yeah,
politics.
yeah.
And
Yes, yesterday also on this interview with the French, they were like, oh, what is like to be a Latin American woman in music? They say, I was wondering how many white straight guys you begin the interview asking, hey, what is like to be
Exactly.
a white straight guy in music industry? And I said, I would love to hear these answers.
Yeah.
I'm dying to hear these answers from you, white straight guys. I would love to hear it.
Gracias.